Czechast, a podcast in English about Czech and Moravian society, history, culture and economy.
Hello and welcome to Czechast, the podcast in English about all things Czech. I'm Vít Pohanka. My guest today is Jan Richter, a climate change adaptation specialist at Prague City Hall. He's an ecologist by training with a background in landscape architecture and urban planning. And much of his work is about making Prague greener and better prepared for a changing climate. And here is something about Prague that surprised me during our conversation. We tend to think of it as a densely built-up city, but within its administrative boundaries, there is actually an extraordinary amount of agricultural land.
Since communism, since late 70s, Prague has a really broad administrational border. Mm-hmm. And it means that 39% of Prague total area, administration area, is actually agricultural land.
And this isn't just land somewhere on the distant outskirts of the capital. Agriculture can sometimes be found in places that most of us think of primarily as Prague's green recreational areas, such as Prokopské Valley in Prague 5.
In Prokopské Valley, there is also one peri-urban farm, and it's actually run by an Czech-American couple.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think they...
I should pay them a visit.
They have the farm in Prokopské Valley.
Urban and peri-urban farming is just one part of our conversation. We also talk about Jan Richter's time in the United States as a Fulbright scholar, what he learned from the transformation of places like Detroit, Prague's brownfields, and above all, the challenge of adapting a centuries-old city to increasingly hot summers as we are witnessing this year. So, here is my conversation with Jan Richter.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.
I'm someone who cares about nature and our environment that we live in since I was a child. And even now, when I'm 40, it's still it is still with me, and it's something that helps me to get out of bed every day. So I'm someone who deeply cares about nature and tries to work every day on increasing our quality of life within sustainable limits of nature. That would be a brief description, but I can talk about that much more.
But we will definitely get to that in more detail. But tell me just a little bit more about where you grew up. I mean, are you Pražák? Are you from Prague? Or are you from other parts, another part of Czechia?
Yeah, I live in Prague last 14 years. I lived in Prague. It became my home. I really like it here. And I think it's even a great place to grow up, raise up children. We have a lot of opportunities here, and the quality of life is very good in Prague. But I'm originally from East Bohemia, from Eagle Mountains, Orlické hory.
Orlické hory, yeah, beautiful part of the country, I have to say.
And during my career, I actually ended up in Prague, and it became my home. I live here, and I love it.
So what did you study?
First of all, I went to České Budějovice, to Bad Weiss, where I studied landscape ecology and ecosystem biology. Basically, a transdisciplinary field of biology.
And that would be Jihočeská univerzita, I suppose, the University of South Bohemia.
Exactly, right, yeah. And when I was finishing my master, I was thinking where to go, what to do next. I was thinking about continuing my studies at PhD at that university, but actually there was a guest lecture by American architect Mike Reynolds. He is, maybe some of you know that name. He is an architect from New Mexico who builds so-called earthships. Basically, he builds sustainable houses integrated with other natural systems. And he gave a really nice lecture. Back then it was like 2010. And it sparked an idea in my head that I could actually connect biology and ecology with architecture. So then I decided to actually search for some other studies that would connect those two fields. And I ended up in Prague.
And
I found another American architect, actually a landscape architect, Henry Hansen, who taught here at Faculty of Architecture in Prague. And I wrote him an email. Hey, I'm a biologist from South Bohemian University, and I'm looking how I could connect these two fields. And I found on your website that you are providing topics for new PhD students. And one of them was called Cities as a Living Organism. And for me, that was the perfect connection of biology and ecology with architecture. So I wrote him an email and he replied me positively, and I came to visit him and I applied for PhD studies, and I was admitted. Surprisingly, actually, because some of those architects in the commission were really not sure if me as a biologist could study architecture. But PhD is kind of a different way of studying. It's basically more research than education. So that was my way to Prague. I actually came here to study PhD in landscape architecture and urban planning. And that's also how I was continuing in my career until today.
Right. So I suppose it was pretty kind of natural and obvious that you would end up at Magistrat, at the city administration.
Yeah, you could say that. There was also another or more stepping stones to until current position I have now in Prague. I went to the US for a Fulbright scholarship. And then when I came back, I was actually approached by people from Prague Institute of Planning and Development. And there was a brand new office of public spaces, and they were looking for a landscape architect or some other specialist in landscape studies. And I got the job. So I actually started to work for IPR, that institute that was actually it's an institute that is organized by the city of Prague or established by the city of Prague. And then there was basically start of my career at Prague.
At the Prague, I mean, I don't want to use the word bureaucracy, but at the Prague administration, administrative system.
Yes,
I find that actually the work of the Institute of what is it officially called? Institute of
Planning and Development.
In Development of Prague. Really fascinating. I actually recently interviewed in Czech Ondřej Boháč, I think his name is, the director. And I'm asking him for an interview for Czechast for this program as well, but he's too busy now, and he promised he would have some time for me in September. And why I find it fascinating is because, I mean, this institute literally kind of creates the future. I mean, it is responsible for the future plans, what Prague will look like. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, you are right. It's one of the key institutions in the whole bureaucratic system of Prague that creates these futures because it's responsible for planning, mainly for creating basically Prague zoning plan.
Zoning system.
The new metropolitan plan was passed through the city assembly
quite recently. I think 2 months ago, something like that.
In May.
I
think it was in May. And of course, you know, all of you, that zoning plans are important for future of any city to they kind of steer the way where the city will develop.
And that's what I find really interesting is that the new kind of vision for Prague is that it could be a city for 2 million people. I mean, that is roughly the plan. But I don't want to dwell on that too much. I will later, just in a minute, ask you about the environmental aspect, I mean, of the plan. But let me ask you about your stay in the US, because as you mentioned, you went there for a Fulbright scholarship. You got to Sunny College of Environmental Science and Forestry in New York State. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
How close or how far is it from New York City?
By car, it was less than 5 hours because it's located in Syracuse, upstate New York, basically close to Rochester, and it was like 4 hours to Niagara Falls. It was actually one of best parts of my life to stay there for 10 months. And that's the college is part of the State University of New York system of colleges. So it was not in New York City, but I visited New York City quite often because by car everything is kind of like close in the US. And I had the opportunity and the privilege to travel basically the whole northeast of the United States. So I went with my car even to Milwaukee, so basically Midwest of the US. And yeah, that was a great experience.
You know, why I find that interesting is a lot of people, when someone says New York, everybody thinks of New York City, but upstate New York is a completely different kind of story, and it's a completely different place. So, what was it like? What did you do there actually?
Well, I submitted my Fulbright project because I was PhD student back then, so I was applying for Fulbright Masaryk scholarship. That's basically paid half by U.S. government and half by the Czech government. And you have to submit your research project. And my research project actually was about urban food systems in US cities. So I was studying because I was trying to connect that ecology and landscape ecology field with landscape architecture and urban planning. And the best problem to solve is basically sustainable agriculture, or how we will produce food in a sustainable way around cities or even within cities. So basically how we can create more resilient cities in the future in terms of food and food supply, food systems. And in the US, actually, the studies of food systems have been pretty advanced back then. And that was a logical way to go there to actually learn more and meet people in this field. And the professor who was hosting me, Matthew Potager at the Syracuse University, he actually was active, or he's still active in this field. He's connecting from the agriculture with landscape architecture. So, and I was always intriguing into connecting different fields in this transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary studies, and Americans are really famous for this kind of approach in academia. And that was actually great opportunity to talk to some front experts in this field and to visit many projects in American cities that basically are trying to give answers or trying to expand this field of sustainable agriculture within or around cities. So, yeah.
Could you give us an example of an interesting project, that you visited, perhaps? Just to have a better idea.
Yeah, I think the most interesting for me was Detroit, because Detroit has complicated history.
Very much so. I actually visited Detroit several times, actually. I was there for the automotive show. There's a big car show every year. But I went there specifically, I think it was back in 2013. The city was I mean, it's been in a crisis for a long, long time.
Yes.
But I visited some of the most, I would say, even devastated part of the city center.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
that's,
and yes,
it can be shocking. I mean, in places.
Yeah.
It was.
It's for me as a European, it was kind of like a post-apocalyptic
Exactly.
image. It was fascinating in a way, and actually, and because a lot of people from Detroit moved out, and the whole city was shrinking, and it actually became bankrupt maybe several times. So they had or they still have a problem what to do with the vast kind of urban prairies that were left after those more like suburban houses were demolished. So basically, agriculture was one of the answers. And back then, Detroit also created, or initiatives in Detroit created, like urban agriculture plan for Detroit, how to revive parts of Detroit, how to put those vacant lots into more sensible and sustainable use. And cultivating the land, agriculture was one of the answers. So that was very fascinating.
But I have a question. You talk about answers. What would they grow there, for example?
Crops, wheat, anything.
Grains, simply.
Yeah, grains, vegetables.
As well.
There are actually in the US is a pretty, and nowadays even more than back then. There is a big movement of market gardens, basically small vegetable gardens that are operated with 1 or 2 people, or family-owned market gardens who grow and sell produce to local markets. And in most of the U.S. cities, you have still the tradition of farmers markets.
Exactly. Yeah.
And actually, in the U.S., a lot of these small businesses, they can make a living from it. And that's actually something I'm interested in a little bit here in Prague, to maybe in the future kind of like try it as well here.
I was just going to come back to Prague, where we are sitting just now. Prague doesn't look like Detroit, not at all. However, from the interview that I did in Czech with Ondřej Boháč, I remember that we talked about the fact that only about 2% of the Prague's area is the Prague for tourists, you know. I mean, is the Prague...
the city center.
The city center. So that means 98% of Prague is places where people live, like David says, some of the very nice places in Prague 6, but some of the not so nice places, like the housing estates in the southeast, kind of southeast part of Prague, or Jižní Město, South City, etc. And there's a lot of space, as I learned, that isn't used. There's a lot of brownfield in Prague as well. Now, from your environmental point of view, now bringing in your specialization, adaptation for climate change, what are the kind of things, projects that you would like to mention in this respect that you have in mind or you are planning?
Yeah, well, regarding brownfields in Prague, because Prague was historically a very industrial city. And for example, Karlín, after the floods in 2002, it was devastated, and there actually right now is basically a new quarter.
Just for the listeners to know what we are talking about, Karlín, Libeň, let's say we are talking about what is now Prague 8, I think, officially, administratively. And it used to be a very industrial area, but also, I mean, residential area for working class mainly. And it was very badly hit by the floods in 2002.
Yeah. And basically since then it was rebuilt, and now it's one of the best parts of the city for people who really want to live or stay in a very vibrant, hype.
I would even say it's kind of gentrified in many places,
it is,
especially Karlín.
Anyway, there are other brownfields that are not yet developed, and of course, it's much better to expand city within its city limits in those brownfields than to expand the city into open landscape, where we have agriculture, for example. So brownfields are definitely a big topic and a big potential for future development of Prague. We will see if the future brings 2 million Prague
inhabitants.
Inhabitants. It's in the future. We will see. But also what I would like to mention in this regard is that Prague has actually a lot of agricultural land. Since communism, since like late 70s, Prague has a really broad administrational border. And it means that like 39% of Prague total area, administration area, is actually agricultural land.
Arable land, yeah?
Arable land, pastures, orchards, gardens.
And forests as well?
No. Forest is another.
That's separate. That's a different category.
Yeah, and it's another 30%, and another like I would say 40-something% is built area, city. So there's actually a huge potential for more sustainable agriculture within the Prague administration border, and also one of our goals within the city adaptation to climate change is to bring pilot projects and new ideas how to sustainably develop these agricultural land, how to put it in use in a way that it will be beneficial for the inhabitants, and also it will be developed in a way that it won't be built up, but also it will create some kind of like a green belt around the city. And that's actually this kind of idea is also part of the DNA of this new metropolitan plan that kind of like creates this kind of interface, green interface. And I would say that agriculture or some peri-urban agriculture is future very important land use for these areas, because it brings economy. It creates some economic value. It produces food that's very high valuable, and then the built environment, the city provides the market for this local food. So there is a huge potential, and that's actually something that I'm very interested in.
Yeah, this is really fascinating. I never realized, I never knew that 39% is
39% is like a agriculture dedicated land use, basically.
Land use.
Not just arable land, but also gardens, vineyards, orchards.
Who are the owners? I mean, is it a kind of mixture, or is there a dominant owner like the city? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a mixture. It's a mixture. Private land, city-owned land. Also, the Czech Republic, the state owns some of the land from previous period. From communism, that was still not sold or
claimed by
original owners. And also like some monasteries or church owns a lot of land in Prague as well. So it's a mixture, and that's also sometimes one of the barriers or one of the hurdles when you want to develop some area or you want to create some project, that you have to kind of settle these ownership relations in the city. You have to buy out the land, for example, and so it's also one of issues that you will face when you try to create some bigger project.
If we look at, for example, Prokopské údolí, which I like very much, and that is, all of it is in Prague. No, yes. It is. And just for the listeners again, I mean, it's this great valley, which is great, I mean, for cycling and for walking, hiking. And there are some trees. I mean, there's a wooded areas. Yeah. There are some meadows, if I remember. There are former quarries there. What would be your plan for Prokop Valley, for Prokopské údolí?
Well, we already have some plans, because there are parts that are natural protected areas. Prague has a lot of
nature protected
areas. But I can surprise you that in Prokopské Valley there is also one peri-urban farm, and it's actually run by an Czech-American couple.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think they.
I should pay them a visit.
They have the farm in Prokopské Valley. So there are actually almost like over 10 peri-urban farms in Prague. There is one big project called Metro Farm. I'm part of this project. I can talk about that also later. But in Prague, it will be always like a combination of some production, like agriculture, for example, nature protection, recreational areas, and the magic will be always in a very balanced combination of these uses. Something that will work, because every decade, every generation, you have different approach to the nature. In 90s, there was a different thinking about peri-urban landscape. It was not thought about like a space for agriculture, because it was the old school thinking in communist era to really like take yields from these landscapes, and it was more like in a recreational area of thinking about these lands. But now we are kind of like shifting in different generation. We are in different era, and we are facing also different or more like a future that will be maybe more challenging in terms of resiliency. So we have to think about these areas as some multifunctional landscapes that can be changes slowly into different functions, but still we have to protect the values that those landscapes have, because those values they are those who create the landscapes, the value of the landscapes, and also that they support the ecosystems and the health of ecosystems that we need for healthy city as well.
Right now that we are talking, there's another heat wave. This is, I think, the second, this year. And you are trying to do something about that. You talked to Czech radio about it in Czech, and I actually used some of that program a few days ago. For the listeners of Czechast, what can people do in a beautiful place like Prague is in its center, but it's all stone? There's in the real center, there are not so many parks, obviously. What can people do? How can you adapt a place like that for such, heat that we really do not remember because there were record temperatures?
Yeah, you can adapt medieval city center in some degree. It has its limits because the medieval city was not built for this climate, and was definitely not built for the future climate. What we do is we are trying to introduce technologies and approaches how to plant more trees in streets, also in the medieval city center, because functional vegetation is the only adaptation measure that really works. Big healthy trees, they can provide shade, they can actively cool down the surrounding air by evapotranspiration from the leaves. So and they actually work like a natural air conditioning. So to put as much active vegetation into these city center streets, also medieval city center, is something that will be very needed, and it will be the key. But of course, it has its limits. The medieval streets are narrow. There are always also a lot of infrastructure beneath the pavement. So you have to combine. You have to know how to integrate pipes and cables with tree roots. And it's also one of our projects or activities. We are trying to develop a system of tree plantings in these kind of conditions. There are ways how to combine, how to integrate these in technical infrastructure with the green infrastructure, and that will be one of our answers. And that's basically the major way in Prague how we try to adapt the city center.
Let me just ask you a very kind of basic layperson question. So are there some trees or is there some vegetation that has roots that are more kind of compatible, let's say, with the pipes and cables that are underground?
Yeah, it's not about specific tree species or specific vegetation. It's more about what kind of conditions you create underground for the roots. Because in the past, the conventional tree plantings was just basically that you dig a hole
put the tree there,
and you put that's it. But it comes with a lot of problems. The tree will become root bound, so called, so it can fall down when there is a big wind, or it can look actively. The roots will always look for air and water. And where is air and water under the pavement? It's around the water pipes, for example, because there is a gravel and there is water, and sometimes the pipes are leaking. So that's actually where trees are looking for water. So what do? We call it, there's one of technologies, and not the only one. We call it structural substrates. And that's actually that you dig up a very big volume of earth beneath the pavement. You fill it up with a mixture of like crushed rocks, big gravel, combined with compost and biochar, which is like organic part of this substrate that provides some kind of attributes that help the tree to retain water. And you create this kind of like a system. It has many layers, and then you are able to pave above it. So basically a tourist or an inhabitant or visitors, they are actually not able to recognize that there is some system beneath the pavement.
Yeah.
But you create very preferable, a beneficial root space for the trees. And also we are able to combine it with water management. So we can collect rainwater from the sidewalks and to bring it to the roots.
To direct it, into.
And then there is a system of like a drainage pipes that kind of like work with that water, so it won't get waterlogged. So you won't drain or drown the tree, and it's passive. So you don't need to after the tree creates the root system, you don't need to water it because it gets all the water it needs during storms, and it retains the water also through the period of drought. And that's the way we are trying to create. We are trying to plant street trees, and the goal is to create very healthy trees with big crowns that provide this shade. So because that was a problem in the past, that planted trees, they were not growing. They just stopped because they had no space for their roots. So the roots is the key, and you need air and water for the roots. So creating preferable conditions under the pavements is the key. And the good thing is that you can plant this way also in the medieval parts of the city where there is heritage protection, because you can put also historical pavement above this system, and nobody knows that there's something new beneath it.
So, from trees to the city, if you were to explain to the listeners, what do you think Prague should look like, let's say in 3 decades, vis-a-vis the climate change? I mean, will the city, obviously the city center will probably look very much like it looks now, but what will be the changes you think either will be in place or you would like to see?
Yeah, I would love to see that Prague would really use this kind of green infrastructure approach and really put as much trees and other vegetation, also like climbing vines on facades, green roofs, that we would have as much as possible of those solutions within the city, because only active vegetation can cool down the urban environment that is overheated because of these extreme temperatures, and it will provide a more livable environment for all of us. There are actually limits. You are not able to. We will not be able to adapt through the future that will be really, really hot. So we also need to take mitigation measures, not just as a city, but also as the whole society, Europe, the whole globe. So also, if we are talking about adaptation, we have to also say mitigation. So actually, in Prague, we have climate plan. Prague actually passed in 2019 a pledge. The city assembly approved a climate pledge that says that Prague will become carbon neutral in 2050. So right now we are on a track. We are decreasing CO2 emissions according to the plan. But of course, it won't be linear. There will be barriers on the way because to really decrease the CO2 emissions, it will require transformation of energy, transformation of transport in the city. And that is something that I would like to see. That would be the ideal future, that in 2050, that's basically 25 years from now, we will be, if not totally carbon neutral, we'll be really, really low emission city. So very green, very less or much less cars in the city. And maybe then the city still will be livable through those warm periods of years.
Well, Jan Richter, thank you very much for your time. Is there something perhaps that I didn't ask about and you feel kind of itching you would like to say in this respect?
I think what's really important to say that sometimes all this threat of climate change and the climate crisis, it can feel very overwhelming for people, even in Prague. So I would try to ask everyone to do even small steps in your personal lives, in your professions, to kind of alleviate this anxiety from the future, to really help the city in some way to be more active, maybe in like a local municipal politics or in some NGOs, to really take some active approach. And as in my that's my experience, that this kind of personal effort to try to do some change, it really helps with the feeling from your own personal future, and that you are some contributor to a better future. So I would suggest to everyone, if you feel under weather from this kind of extreme temperatures, to really think about how you can contribute and to help city to adapt to the future.
Yeah, as they say, think globally, act locally, I think.
Yeah, that's still valid phrase.
Thank you. That was Jan Richter, climate change adaptation specialist at Prague City Hall. And before we finish, a little preview of the next Czechast, because my guest will be none other than former Czech President Václav Klaus, arguably the main architect of the country's economic transformation after the fall of communism. We did get into serious issues of today's Czech and international politics and economy, but before that, we talked about Prague. Because if there is such a thing as true Pražák, a born and bred Prague local, Václav Klaus certainly qualifies. He grew up in Vinohrady, not far from the Czech Radio building, and remembers a very different city from the one we know today.
The famous Legerova street was really a street with no ends, with no connections on both sides, and there was no one there. There was one car in 10 minutes going.
That's just a little taste of what you can look forward to in the next episode of Czechast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow Czechast and recommend it to a friend. It really helps me reach more listeners. And if you have a suggestion for the podcast, a person I should talk to, a place I should visit, or a Czech story worth exploring, please get in touch. It's fairly easy to find me. I'm Vít Pohanka. Thank you for listening. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay curious. And as we say in Czech, naslyšenou.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.